Hello and welcome everyone. Apologies for the delay. We had a little bit of a technical glitch, but I'm glad that you're still here with us. Today's town hall is going to be presented to you by me and my colleague Dilbar, and it's mainly for those of you who are newcomers to the fund and current participants. So we do regularly give sessions on pre-retirement, and this is not one of those sessions, so we will not be going into great detail of retirement benefit options and the separation process. So today we will be talking about the essentials for those who are new or recent participants. So I'm just going to share my screen, start the presentation. Today's presentation will cover the following topics, and I will present the first half, and then my colleague Dilbar will take over. When we are about halfway through, we'll open up the Q&A. So you can submit your questions in the Q&A, and after the presentation is finished, we'll have time to answer your questions live. So when you submit your questions, please be mindful that the topic of today's session is pension essentials for participants and newcomers. And also please keep in mind that we wouldn't be able to answer some very specific questions about your personal situation if it would require us looking in your file to see, the details. So try to keep it of a general nature if you're going to submit a question. We'll do our best to get through all the questions, or at least to group them into similar themes and hopefully be able to answer all of them. So today we'll start with a brief overview of the pension fund and its UNJSPF, meaning United Nations Joint Staff Pension Fund type of scheme. Then what do you need to know about being a participant? Thereafter, my colleague will take over and go over some of the pension definitions and the key factors when we talk about pension benefits. So this will help you to understand, and when you go to our website and look at the information there, it will be more accessible to you. Then, because we're not talking about retirement benefits in any great detail, there will just be a high-level overview of the key pension benefits that are paid to you upon separation, and those benefits that are paid to survivors in the event of your death. Finally, a very important part of today's presentation will be looking at the pension tools that are available to you. And Dilbar will give a demonstration of what's available on our website and in member self-service. So just a reminder before I go on that the presentations that we give are to try to make the information about pension more easily understandable. But if there is any discrepancy between what we convey and what's in our regulations and rules, please be aware that the regulations and rules take precedence. So, to get started, let's look at what is the UNJSPF? What type of pension scheme are we part of? We do have a recommendation, just to start off, of 2 videos which will be shown to you how to access when we get to the part about the pension tools on our website. the Welcome to the Fund video, and how the fund works. These videos are all quite short. Most are fewer than 5 minutes long, and they're available in English, French, or Spanish. So this will give you a very quick overview of how the fund works, but I'll give you some information today as well. So the pension fund's main purpose is to provide you with income replacement when you separate from service. If you have participated in the fund for at least 5 years at the time of your separation from service, then you will be vested. That's what we refer to as having vested pension rights, and that means that you would be entitled to some form of a monthly pension benefit for life. And this is meant to replace your income. Now, the amount that you would receive depends on various factors, and it's not going to be the same amount as what you earned as a salary, but it is a monthly benefit for life if you have contributed at least 5 years when you separate from service. Another purpose of the fund is to cover you for disability while you're an active participant, or in the event of your death, to provide a survivor's benefit to your recognized dependents. For disability and death benefits, it's not required that you have vested pension rights. So you do not have to have contributed to the pension fund for at least 5 years in order to be covered for disability and death benefits. However, you do need to have been medically cleared at the time of your commencement to participation in the fund. So we are a United Nations Joint Staff Pension Fund. Who do we serve? We serve 25 member organizations. So these are, for example, the various UN family and specialized agencies, such as ILO or WHO, and altogether, these 25 member organizations are members of the fund, and as you know, you pay your contributions each month to the pension fund. We also have transfer agreements with 24 other organizations. These are not member organizations of the fund, but they have an agreement with the pension fund to transfer pension rights to and from. So that would be organizations such as the World Bank or the African Development Bank and various European organizations. So we have a list of all the different transfer agreements also on our website. This would be relevant if you were going to be separating from service and joining one of those organizations, or if you were coming from one of those organizations and into the pension fund. When we talk about the 25 member organizations, let's say you work for UNICEF and you're then going to go and work for UNDP, those are both member organizations of the fund. And so your participation is part of being a member of one of those member organizations. And this does not fall under those types of transfer agreements that I was referring to. So another aspect of the pension fund is who do we serve? So not just us as participants, but also our retirees and our beneficiaries. So we currently pay almost 90,000 monthly benefits. We have a payroll, a monthly payroll, and our retirees are paid their pension benefit at the end of the month, and we have many beneficiaries, so in terms of survivors, for example. So these clients, along with our active participants, are our client base. And you can see the figures there at the bottom of the slide, which are from the end of the previous year. How do we serve? Well, we calculate and pay pension benefits, and for more than 90% of the cases, when you separate and you're entitled to a pension benefit, more than 90% of these benefits are processed within 15 business days of receipt of all of the required documentation from you and your former employer. And once you or someone is on the payroll for a monthly benefit, a monthly pension benefit, the delivery of those monthly benefits is 100%. So we are able to pay our monthly pension benefits on time in 100% of the cases. The fund is a defined benefit plan, which I'll talk about in just a moment. And we have information about the investments side of the pension fund. This figure at the bottom left of the slide is from the end of 2024, the market value that was recorded then, and you can see on our website the regular updates as to the market value. So it's currently higher than what's on this slide. And just to say that also the fund is strong and healthy. We have a 111% funded ratio. This was the latest recorded figure. So in the regular assessments of the fund and the reviews, the fund is still receiving enough in contributions to be able to confidently pay our obligations for the coming decades. So those who are currently receiving benefits and those of us who are participants and looking forward to being able to receive our pension benefits when we separate, we can still feel confident that the fund is a very strongly funded organization. We have a global presence. So this part that is presenting today is the client services section of the fund, and we're part of the pension administration. The pension administration and the Office of Investment Management are headquartered in New York, but the Office of the Pension Administration also has an staff in Geneva. That's where I'm located, and we have small liaison offices in Nairobi and Bangkok. So in all, we have around 400 staff from many different nationalities working together to serve you. So what type of pension benefit plan are we? We're what's called a defined benefit plan. This is the type of plan that is not dependent on investment return or longevity. So this is not the type of plan where you pay money from your salary, and then depending on how the investment return was at the time that you separate and cash out, you will either get more or less back. No, this is a type of plan with a guaranteed income, and the pension benefit that you're going to be entitled to will be based on various factors, and these are then determined based on, for example, the length of service and your average level and step and corresponding pensionable remuneration rate when you separate from service. These are factors that are used to determine what your defined benefit would be. So the contributions that you pay and your employer pay to the pension fund all go into a pool along with investment returns, and this pool of assets and contributions are used to fund in part the administration of the fund, but also to pay all of the periodic benefits that we pay, which, as you saw, was around 90,000 clients. And these periodic benefits or monthly benefits are determined based on established factors. So this is where the defined benefit term comes in. So we take into account things, as I said, such as your length of contributory service and your final average income level and your age at the time of separation. And your benefit amount is determined at your separation date. If you're entitled to a monthly benefit, that benefit will be paid for life, and so it will be that determined amount which will be paid, and it's not the type of benefit that will change according to what the investment of your contributions turned out to be at the time of separation. So in some plans, as I mentioned, you will only get what your contributions ended up to be based on the investment return. But the pension fund that we're members of is a very generous and healthy plan. So you'll know when you are separating what your benefit will be, and that will be your benefit for life if you have a monthly benefit. The benefits that you'll see determined at your separation date are all expressed in US dollars. So this pension plan is a US dollar-based scheme. And even if you're paid in a different currency, your contributions are reported to the pension fund in dollars, and your benefit is initially calculated in US dollars. This illustration shows the defined benefit scheme where the contributions and the investment income are pulled together, and from that pool, the administration of the fund and the benefits are paid. So I won't go into detail about the investments, but this slide is to inform you where you can find that information, and you can also see that when we get to the part of the demo on the website and the tools that are available for you there. But we do have a video on the investments, and the links are here. You'll get this presentation made available on our website, where we record the recording and the presentations. So that was a little bit about the type of plan that we are. And in this part, I want to talk to you about what does it mean to be a participant in the fund? So you might not remember, but you weren't asked if you wanted to join the fund. You were just enrolled in the fund when you met the eligibility requirements. So according to our regulations, you will be eligible to participate in the fund when you have a staff member contract of at least 6 months in duration, or after you have completed at least 6 months of service without a break of more than 30 days. So you might have had a very short contract at the beginning of your employment and you weren't yet eligible to participate, or maybe you joined and then immediately had a 1-year contract. So depending on the length of your contract, you were enrolled either at the beginning of your employment or perhaps at a later date when you met these eligibility requirements according to our regulations. And once you became a participant, your contributions were deducted from your monthly pay or your regular pay. And the amount that you're paying is 7.9% of what is called a pensionable remuneration rate. Your employer also contributes on your behalf, and they pay twice as much into the fund as you. So this pensionable remuneration rate is an amount that's used just to determine what your pension contribution will be. And it correlates to your level and step in your salary, but it is a different figure from your salary. On this slide, you can see at the top left a pensionable remuneration scale for professional and higher categories. This pensionable remuneration scale is published on the ICSC website, and this is the scale from February 2025. You can see it looks a lot like a salary scale, but it's not. It's only for pensionable remuneration rates. And this professional and higher category pensionable remuneration scale is in US dollars. So as an example, if the staff member is a level P3 step 7, there is a corresponding pensionable remuneration rate for that level and step. And that amount is used to calculate how much that staff member will be paying in pension contributions each month. So we look at that figure of 185,821. And for those who are paid in through Umoja, this pensionable remuneration rate appears on your payslip. So that is a figure. Then we take 7.9% of 1/12 of that for the monthly amount, and that is the amount that's deducted from your payslip in this example. And the employing organization pays twice that amount. So this amount, this pensionable remuneration figure, is not your future pension. This is not, it's not an indication of what you're going to get as a future pension. So please be aware that that is not what this figure is for. This pensionable remuneration rate is used to determine what your pension contributions are. So on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see an example of a salary slip from Umoja, and the pensionable remuneration rate that corresponds to that level and step is at the top of the pay slip. And then you can see the amount that's deducted from the staff member's salary That is 7.9% of 1/12 of that pensionable remuneration rate. And twice that amount is paid by the organization on the staff member's behalf. So that all goes into that pool of contributions and investment assets. This is another document which will be important for you to become familiar with. This is the yearly pension statement. And on this yearly pension statement, you will find your pensionable remuneration rates at the bottom in section E. And it will not be the entire history of your pensionable remuneration rates, but it will be as many as can fit in this section. Let me go through the statement from the top to the bottom just to go in order. So this yearly statement is produced around the middle of May, and it will be the balance of your pension account as of the end of the previous year. So we are now in April. In a month's time, you will have the 2025 statement available to you. And the only place you'll be able to access this is in your member self-service account. So later in the presentation, you'll see how to access that account. And if you haven't registered yet, you are strongly encouraged to do so, because you will find not only this document, but access to your pension estimates and other useful information there. Okay, so this statement has the year in question, so the balance as of the end of whichever calendar year is reflected in that statement. Currently, the most recent one on file for you is the one effective 31 December 2024. In section A, you'll find your personal data as reported to the pension fund by your employer. And it will have information such as which organization is reporting your contributions. And if you're vested, so you see the Y in this example means yes, this person has contributed for at least 5 years to the pension fund. Some of this information has been erased so that we don't disclose some actual person's confidential information, but there is a section there for the birth date, gender, marital status, category, the pension number, and your normal retirement age. So in section A, this information is primarily conveyed to the pension fund by your employer. If there's anything that is incorrect in this section, you would be asked to please contact your human resources office to have this information updated or corrected. And it's important that you do check this every year. And if there is any incorrect information, to have it corrected as soon as possible. Or, for example, if your marital status hasn't been updated. But be aware, since this document is produced only once a year, if you got married now, for example, in April 2026, then you will not see the marital status reflected on the 2025 statement that will be published next month. So it's a monthly, it's a yearly document, a yearly statement. So just keep that in mind. So now we look at section B. This is about contributory service and gives some information about when you started participating in the fund and what your cumulative total in years, months, and days is. If you had any period where you were not participating, so for example, a period of leave without pay, then that is indicated also here on the right-hand side of this section B. Underneath section B is section C, and this is about your contributions to the fund. So that portion that you yourself paid from your salary, not the part that your organization paid on your behalf, but only the part that came from your own salary. And this will be reflected in US dollars here on the annual pension statement. So even if you were paid in a different currency, the figures on your pension statement will be reflected in US dollars. So this will show you what your prior year balance was in contributions and interest, and then what the current year of contributions is, along with the total as of the end of the year in question. Interest is accrued at 3.25% per year is compound interest, and at the bottom of section C, you can see that the contributions and the interest, the cumulative totals are separated there, so you can see which are which. Then in section D, this is about other contributions. So it's could very well be empty because you didn't have any other type of contributions. I'll go over that in just a moment, but this is the additional payment. For example, if you did start your contract and you were not yet eligible to contribute to the fund or to be a participant in the fund, and then when you had an appointment of 6 months or longer, or when you had reached the point of at least 6 months of service, you would have the option to validate the prior period. So when you maybe had 3 months initially that you had a short contract, you could then pay contributions to add that contributory service to your account. There's a deadline of 1 year to make this decision, and the validation and restoration are not going to be open to everybody. It depends on, as I said, if you started contributing from the time you started your employment or not, and with the strictly applied deadline of 1 year from the beginning of your contribution that you can make this decision. Restoration is if you had a prior period of participating in the fund and you separated from service and took a payment, a one-time payment, and then you returned again to active participation and then paid back that money that you received, and then you restored your period of contributory service to your account. And then finally, section E is annual pensionable remuneration. So this is where we've recorded what your pensionable remuneration rate was, the effective date, and how many months that rate applied. Now here it's reflected in US dollars. So if you're a professional or higher whose pensionable remuneration rates are reflected in that table we saw on the previous slide, and they're in dollars, it could be that the rate applies for an entire calendar year, for 12 months, maybe until you had an increase by an increment, for example. But if you are paid in a different currency and a locally recruited staff member in a duty station outside of where the US dollar is the currency of your payment, it could be that you have a change in pensionable remuneration rate very frequently because of the exchange rate. So as I mentioned earlier, you will not necessarily see your whole history of pensionable remuneration rates, but you'll see from the latest going back as far as can fit in this section. Okay, so that's just to get you aware that this pension statement has a lot of information in it, and to please check the statement, and you'll need to have access to your member self-service account in order to do that. A few things to keep in mind about participation in the fund. It is mandatory once you've met the requirements listed in Article 21 of our regulations. So you do not get a choice. You will be enrolled once you meet the requirements. And from the time that you are a participant, you're covered for disability benefit or death, assuming you were medically cleared at the time that you joined. Secondly, once you've become a participant, the contributions are automatically deducted from your salary. And I mentioned that it's 7.9% of that pensionable remuneration rate that corresponds to your level and step. That's the amount that is deducted from your salary as your pension contribution. Third, no voluntary contributions can be made to the fund. For example, during a break in service, during a period when you're not a staff member, and in between contracts, you cannot make voluntary contributions to the fund. Or after separation from service, you can no longer make contributions to the fund. Fourth, once you reach 5 years of contributory service, you will have vested pension rights, and that means that you will have the right to a monthly pension benefit for life after you separate from service. Fifth, you earn compound interest on your contributions. So the accrual is at 3.25% per year, and this is for as long as you remained an active participant and are contributing up until your date of separation. So interest does not accrue on your contributions after you separate from service. Even if you leave your money in the fund for a while, the interest accrual stops at your separation date. Sixth, the fund does not extend personal loans. So although you have this money in the fund, you've contributed every month, you cannot take any payment while you're still an active participant. We don't allow for advance payments or partial payments or withdrawals or loans from your account. You have to separate before you can receive any payment. Seventh, we also do not make payments to a third party. So any payment has to be made to a bank account that bears your name. You can have a shared bank account as long as your name is one of the account holders. And finally, point 8, the fund cannot release confidential information to a third party without your authorization. So please be mindful that sometimes we do get requests for information from maybe your national pension scheme or something like that. We cannot provide that information unless we have your written authorization to provide information about you to a third party. We will not do that. Benefits upon becoming a participant. So just to go into a little bit more detail about the disability and death coverage. So again, provided you were medically cleared when you joined, the disability benefit, this is a monthly benefit payable if you are deemed to be unfit to work for a permanent or at least a long duration. And in order to have this recognized, there's a process. So you have to have your case reviewed by the Staff Pension Committee. If you're a member of the UN family, it's going to be the pension fund, or if you're a member of a specialized agency, they have their own Staff Pension Committee. So either you or your organization applies for this, for you to be reviewed for disability. And then depending on the nature of your disability, it could be that you're awarded, you could be denied if it's not deemed to be disability, or if you're approved, it could be for a particular length of time subject to a review. And if you are approved for disability benefit, it can start, it's a payment from the pension fund, it's a monthly benefit only, not a lump sum amount, it's a monthly benefit. And this benefit payment would start only after you have used up all of your paid leave entitlements with your employing organization. That means all of your paid annual leave and sick leave entitlement. So even if you're approved for disability, you still have to first use up all of that paid leave entitlement before you are separated from service and then start to receive your disability benefit from the pension fund. And as long as you're deemed to be disabled, this monthly benefit would be paid. As I mentioned, sometimes there's a periodic review, and if you are deemed to still be disabled and the approval has been valid up until at least the time that you are 55 or 58 years old, depending on what your early retirement age is, this disability benefit is often then approved for life. And the amount of the benefit is roughly what you would have received if you had worked up until your normal retirement age. So this will give you some information about this type of benefit, which is payable in the event that you become disabled and unable to work. And then the other benefit is about death benefits. So the death benefits would be, for example, if you die in service, then, and you're married, your spouse, who's your recognized spouse while you're an active staff member, this spouse would be eligible to receive a surviving spouse's benefit, provided that you're still married at the time of your death. So this is assuming death in service while you're an active staff member. And the survivor's benefit is roughly half of what you would have received if you had worked up until your normal retirement age. So the surviving spouse's benefit is half of that amount. It's a monthly benefit only. There's no lump sum option for a spouse's benefit. And the benefits payable from the date after your death. If you have children under the age of 21, they would also be eligible to receive a survivor's benefit, and that is called a child's benefit, and it's payable up until the age of 21. It's mentioned here that children who are recognized as disabled by the fund are eligible to receive benefits beyond age 21 for as long as their disability lasts. So just be aware that if you have a child who's disabled, this disability also goes through the same process as the disability review for the staff. So the child would have to be recognized by the pension fund as disabled. And if approved, then the child's benefit could be payable beyond age 21. So please make sure that you keep your information up to date on your marital status and on your family status. all dependents that are your dependents are reported to your organization, so they can report them to the pension fund. So even if you have a limit to the number of children that are recognized by your employer, you should still report them to your organization so they can be reported to the pension fund. A few more things about being a participant. Your future pension benefit is based on, as I said, a few factors. So in the defined benefit plan, the longer that you contribute to the fund and the higher your income level is in your last 5 years of service are going to mean a higher pension benefit when you do separate from service. So the longer you can serve and contribute to the pension fund, the higher your benefit would be. We have mentioned here about trying to increase your contributory service as much as possible. If you do have the ability to, if you have any control over this, minimize breaks in service and minimize periods of leave without pay where you don't pay pension contributions. And if you do have the option to validate or restore, then take advantage of those options so that increases your contributory service. The other aspect that affects your future pension benefit is your final average remuneration, so your income level. When you separate from service, we look at what your pensionable remuneration rates were in your last 5 years of service. And we take the highest 36 months out of those last 5 years, and we take the average of that to use in the calculation of your future pension benefit. So just to say, the higher your level and step and corresponding pensionable remuneration rate in your last 5 years of service, the higher your pension benefit would be. So this slide just mentions again some of these purchases of contributory service that I mentioned: validation, restoration, and transferring your pension rights. So if you are coming from, if you're new to the fund and you've come from one of the organizations that has a transfer agreement with the pension fund, you could look into what pension rights you could transfer from your previous employer to the pension fund and add to your UNJSPF pension. And during periods of special leave without pay, you have the option to pay contributions, but you generally have to pay your own 7.9% plus the 15.8% that your organization normally pays. So it's quite expensive to pay contributions during leave without pay. But if you do not pay contributions during that period, then that is a non-contributory period, which means you have less contributory service at the end of the day than you would if you were paying consistently throughout your leave without pay. And on these slides, it's just to highlight again some of the topics that I've covered about leave without pay, paying contributions or not paying contributions, things to consider. If you're, as I mentioned, it's quite expensive to pay contributions, but on the other hand, you remain a participant. Nothing changes in your status as a contributing participant in the fund. And if you do not pay contributions during that period, and let's say you were to to marry during a period of leave without pay, without contributions being paid, then that spouse would not be recognized in the event of your death, unless and until you again became a contributing participant. So these are things to be aware of if you are planning to go on leave without pay, and you need to make the decision before you start your leave without pay whether or not you're going to make contributions. And this will be arranged between you and your payroll office, and you need to make the contribution payments concurrent with your leave without pay. You cannot make it retroactively. Also, just a point about part-time employment. As long as you're at least 50% employed, you are eligible to participate in the fund. Anything less, you're not eligible. But at least 50%, we know there are participants who are employed at various percentages throughout their careers, and the vested requirement, though, it remains 5 years. So even if you're on 50% employment, as long as you have contributed for 5 years, you're vested, meaning you have the right to a monthly pension benefit for life when you separate. The amount that you would receive would be reduced in proportion to the period that you were on 50%, but you are vested after just 5 years. And then finally, break in service. This is a period in between contracts when you're not a staff member. If your break in service is less than 30 days, then you remain a participant, and you will just your participation will continue when you resume your employment. There will just be some days that you're not contributing. But if your break in service is more than 30 days, but less than 36 months, and you didn't take any payment from the fund, then you have to requalify, meaning you will need to have at least a contract of at least 6 months, or have 6 months of service without a break of more than 30 days, and then your participation will resume. But it's considered continuous participation. It's just a period without contributions being paid. And then the next scenario is if your break in service is more than 36 months, then you'll have 2 separate periods of participation, the one before your break and the one when you return. And if you took a payment from your first one, then regardless of the break, when you come back, you'll have a new participation. And remember, you can restore the payment that you took from your first participation when you do return into active participation. So please be aware of these options, and there are time deadlines with restoration, for example. So it's important to familiarize yourself with the restoration and validation requirements and see if you're eligible. Here are a few more points about breaks in service. I think I've covered them all. One thing, though, is if you had a period of service that was more than 5 years, and you had we haven't gotten into the types of pension benefits yet, but there's certain type of deferred retirement benefit that you can also restore if you have a break of more than 36 months. And this is then the type of restoration which doesn't involve a payment, but it's an entitlement to a deferred retirement benefit that you can also restore. And be aware of that in case you are, say, a newly returned participant with a prior participation, and you did not take a payment, but you have an outstanding deferred retirement benefit from your prior participation, then please know that there could be this option for restoration under Article 24 bis. So I think the main thing to take away from this is breaks in service. You cannot pay contributions during that period of break in service. And then depending on whether or not you took a payment when you separated, you would have continuous participation if you return within 36 months. And I think at this part, now I've come to where I'm going to turn over to my colleague and we're going to open up the Q&A. So thank you, and I'll hand over to you, Dilbar.
Thank you, Denise. I'm sharing the slides right now. I hope you can all see that. Good day, everyone. Let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Dilbar Muradova, and I work in client services of the New York office. So let's look at the key factors that determine your pension. As Denise mentioned, when you're familiar with them, it will really help you navigate your pension matters on your own. First, the date of entry. This is the date when you become entitled to participate in the pension fund. The date of entry is the key in determining your normal and early retirement ages. It's important to know that your date of entry into the fund may not be the same as your actual start date with your organization. In some cases, you might begin working before you qualify for participation in the fund. This is not unusual, and there is no need to be concerned about if your date of entry is different from your actual start date. The reason is for this could be that your initial contract was not long enough for you to qualify for immediate participation. Or perhaps you were initially hired under a contract type like a consultancy that does not qualify for pension participation. Moving on to contributory service. Contributory service refers to the time when you were an active member, meaning you were paying contributions to the pension fund. If you take specially without pay or have short breaks in service, there will be non-contributory periods during your participation. And contributory service is the key, as Denise mentioned, in calculating your future entitlement benefits. So the longer your contributory service, the higher your rate of accumulation for future entitlements will be. And finally, when calculating your rate of accumulation, that is the rate at which you acquire retirement benefit, we only consider periods during which you were actively contributing to the fund. So again, the longer your contributory service, the higher your rate of accumulation will be, which translates into higher pension benefits. Now, another term is pensionable remuneration. Denise did touch upon it. It's essentially a scale used to calculate your monthly pension through the fund. For professional staff, this scale applies uniformly across all duty stations. This means that whether you are a P3, Step 4 in New York, Geneva, or Vienna, the pensionable remuneration rate for your grade and step will be the same. For local and general service staff, the scale corresponds to your gross pensionable salary, which includes your salary and any pensionable allowance like language allowance. So again, pensionable remuneration is the scale your organization uses to determine how much you and your organization contribute to the pension fund each month. And these scales are set by International Civil Service Commission, not the pension fund. And one last point is that your pensionable remuneration is not what your future entitlements will be. It's just a scale to calculate your pension contribution and what we call your final average remuneration rate, which I will cover shortly. So here's a pensionable remuneration scale for professional staff published by International Service Commission. The latest one is effective 1st February 2026. So for example, a participant at P3, step 3 level has a pensionable remuneration rate of $172,023. This is the rate applicable to all duty stations. And it's used to calculate the 7.9% contribution share you have to pay as a participant. So in this example, this participant has to pay 7.9% of that annual amount of pensionable remuneration of $172,023. Since the deductions are made monthly, you calculate the contribution for each month by taking the annual pensionable remuneration, as listed in the scales, divided by 12, and then apply 7.9 to that monthly amount. And this is how you get your monthly amount. Twice of that amount is reported by your organization on your behalf. And here's an example of pensionable remuneration scale for the general service staff category in New York. As I mentioned, for local and general service staff, this scale corresponds to your gross pensionable remuneration and any pensionable allowance, such as language allowance. The same concept of pension contribution deductions applies. So this is the rate used to calculate the 7.9% annual contribution to the pension fund. Pensionable remuneration is also key in determining your future entitlements. In order for us to calculate any periodic benefit, we will have to look at what was your final average remuneration at the time of separation. And we determine that by calculating or by looking at the last 60 months of your contributory service in the pension fund, and by picking out of those 60 months, the highest 36 months of pensionable remuneration. And then there is concept of vesting. You will earn vested pension rights once you have reached 5 years of contributory service in the pension fund, meaning at that point, you will earn the right to elect a form of a lifelong benefit, retirement benefit from the fund when you separate from service. Just a quick reminder, you are covered for disability and death benefits from the very first day in the fund, as long as you were medically cleared when you joined your organization. This coverage does not depend on being vested in the pension fund. And finally, let's quickly look at the concept of various ages for pension purposes. Let's start with the normal retirement age. It's the age determined under the pension fund regulations and rules as the age at which, if you have vested pension rights, if you separate at or after having reached your normal retirement age, you will be entitled to a normal retirement benefit, meaning a benefit to which no reduction factor needs to be applied because you have reached that age. But if you were to separate before reaching your normal retirement age and we start to pay your benefit before you reach normal retirement age, so that could be either an early or deferred retirement benefit. In that case, the pension fund will have to apply a so-called early retirement reduction factor. We would have to reduce your entitlement by a certain percentage rate for life to compensate for the fact that you start receiving your benefit before having reached your normal retirement age. So currently there are 3 normal retirement ages for pension purposes, depending on when you entered into an active participation in the fund. For example, for those who have entered the fund on or after January 1st, 2014, their normal retirement age is 65. As for early retirement age, we currently have two, 55 for those who joined the fund before 2014 and 58 for those who have joined in or after 2014. What does this mean? It means that anyone who separates from service with vested pension rights at an age between their early and their normal retirement age may opt to elect an early retirement benefit. And finally, mandatory age of separation. It's the age that is set under the staff regulations of your employing organization, not the pension fund, as the date at which you, or the age at which you must separate from service and you can no longer work. So now let's take a look at the key benefits that the fund offers. Again, just a quick heads up, in the session we'll cover these benefits at a high level since our focus today is on participation. If you want to learn more about it, I'll show you all the resources that are available to you in a moment. All right, so your benefit options will be determined based on your separation date. And the types of benefit options you can elect will depend on the length of your contributory service and your age at the time of separation. We first look at whether you have vested pension rights, and if so, whether you have reached your early or normal retirement age at the time of your separation from service. For participants separating with less than 5 years of contributory service, the only benefit option available to them is a withdrawal settlement, regardless of their age at the time of separation. Withdrawal settlement is a one-time payment that settles your relationship with the fund, meaning after we pay your withdrawal settlement, no more benefits will be payable to you or your survivors. The withdrawal settlement is the sum of your own contributions to the fund plus the compound interest earned on these contributions at the time of separation. It does not include organizational share. Very important to remember, a withdrawal settlement never includes contributions made by your employing organization on your behalf. If you have more than 5 years at the time of your separation, withdrawal settlement is still available to you as long as at the time of your separation, you have not reached your normal retirement age. If you have 5 years or more of contributory service at the time of your separation, and elect a withdrawal settlement, you would get an additional 10% for every year and prorated 4 months of contributory service over those initial 5 years. And that increase can be a maximum of 100% of the amount of your own contribution and interest. And you can reach that 100% after 10 years of increase. And it is equivalent to 15 years of contributory service. So if you were to separate with 15 years or more of contributory service and elect a withdrawal settlement, you will receive double of your own contribution and interest earned on those contributions. For participants separating with 5 years or more of contributory service, they have vested pension rights, so they have earned the right to a periodic benefit. These periodic benefits are paid for life, and they are adjusted for the cost of living over time. There are several types of retirement benefits available, and the options you can choose from, if you have vested pension rights, will depend on your age at the time of your separation. So for example, if you separate from service with vested pension rights, after having reached your normal retirement age, the only benefit that will be available to you is the normal retirement benefit. And finally, anyone who separates will always have the option to not make a benefit election. They can choose to delay the choice of benefit election or payout for up to 36 months. All right, so now let's look at the other benefits provided by the pension fund. As mentioned by Denise, you are covered for the risk of disability from the moment you become a member in the fund. This is not something that you elect, it's something that you can apply for. If for a reason of health, you've been out of work for an extended period of time, and it's clear that you will not be able to return to long-term employment, the fund considers your application for disability. Together with the UN Medical Services, they would decide whether your medical situation warrants awarding you a disability benefit. Then there is child benefit. It's payable to each child of a participant who is entitled to a normal, early retirement or disability benefit, or who has died in service. This benefit is payable until the child reaches the age of 21. And children that are disabled and recognized as such by the fund will receive payment of a child allowance beyond the age 21. Now, survivor's benefits. We consider survivor's benefit as regular monthly benefits payable to those that are entitled. In the fund, we distinguish between primary and secondary survivors. Primary survivors are spouse, children, ex-spouse, and secondary survivor is a secondary dependent. Only if there is no primary survivor entitled to a regular monthly payment following your death would we check whether a secondary dependent was reported to the fund as your secondary dependent by your organization. And if so, then we would pay them a benefit. And finally, if following your death, there is no primary, no secondary survivor entitled to a regular monthly payment from the fund, and if at that time there's still money remaining of your own contribution and interest, in that case, the fund will pay a residual settlement to settle its final financial obligation. So keep in mind that if there is a primary survivor or secondary survivor entitled to a monthly payment from the fund will not pay a residual settlement because we're still in a relationship with someone entitled to a regular monthly payment from us. Only if there is no surviving spouse, a surviving child, or surviving ex-spouse, entitled to a regular monthly payment from the fund, only then we would check whether a portion or all of your own contribution and interest remain unpaid. And if so, then we go on to pay a residual settlement. You can designate whoever you wish on the form that serves to designate who should receive a residual settlement from the fund. And this form, A2, is something that you should have completed. And if you haven't or you're not sure, please make sure that you complete and submit it to the fund as soon as possible. You can download this form A2 from your member self-service under the Documents tab, print, date, and hand sign it and submit it to the fund. On this form, you can designate who should receive all or part of the residual settlement. There is no limit to the number of people you can designate. You can even designate an entity. And if there is not enough space on the page, you can turn the page over and continue on the back. Just make sure that you date and hand signed the back part of it too. If you have submitted multiple forms, we would always go by the latest dated form, duly completed and hand signed on file in our records. All right, before we proceed to the Q&A segment, let me quickly walk you through some of the resources that are available to you. First, our website, which is very intuitive and user-friendly. All content is available in 6 official UN languages. The information is organized into sections for clients, investment, resources, etc. For clients, section includes information tailored to your status with the fund, whether you're participating, separating, or retiring, or already in retirement. For active participants, you will find most relevant information under the participating in the fund section. For example, if you're looking to learn more about topics covered today, such as break-in service, leave without pay, or disability, you can find direct links to those resources on our website. The resources section provides you with a variety of helpful materials, including booklets, videos, and pension town hall sessions. So in the town hall pension session section, you'll find information on the past and upcoming sessions. So today's recording, if you want to refer to it, or if you want to find a copy of presentations, you will find them in this section. Or even if you want to learn more about benefits, we did have a dedicated pension town hall recently on the separation essentials. You will find a link to that session as well in that section. If you prefer reading, we also offer booklets on a range of pension topics. These are available in English, French, and some are offered in Spanish. And finally, all of our videos are very informative, they're very short, and they are available in English, French, and Spanish. They are hosted on our YouTube channel, but you can access them directly through our website as well. We also regularly send out newsletters with information that might be relevant to participants. It's worth signing up for the newsletters, so you keep getting updates from us, or you can simply check our website for any important updates. Another important tool that is available to you is member self-service. This platform gives you secure access to your pension account. As of October 2025, all users are now required to re-register and set up multi-factor authentication. We added this security measure to help better protect your personal information. So to register, you'll need your unique ID number, which is a 9-digit number assigned to you by the pension fund. This unique ID stays with you throughout your career. If you don't know your unique ID, you can request it by emailing the pension fund, and we did include email address here. Just make sure to send the email from your official work account to help us verify your identity before providing you with the number. You'll also need to know how your name and date of birth have been reported to the pension fund. If there's any discrepancy, then you won't be able to complete the registration. And finally, make sure to register with your personal email address. You will receive an email with further instructions after completing the registration form. And if at any point you run into a technical issue or you're still having trouble after gathered all the necessary information, you can reach out to our MSS support team. The member self-service page can be found on our website under the resources menu. It includes helpful videos on how to register to MSS with instructions and tutorials available in English, French, and Spanish. You'll also find direct links to the login and registration pages and what to do if you need assistance with your member self-service account. We've made it easy to access MSS, so there are two ways. You can either access through this blue banner on the right or through the resources tab. So once you've re-registered and logged in, you can now take advantage of the member self-service platform. So under the Documents tab, you can access important records such as your annual pension statement. And as Denise mentioned, your 2025 pension statement will be available here next month. Under E-form, you will find official UNJSPF forms that are pre-filled with your UID and your name. For example, if you have not yet submitted your A2 form, you can easily locate it here. After you completed the form, you can submit this form using your MSS, and it's under the MSS document upload feature, provided that your organization allows direct submission. Some organizations prefer to review the documents for quality control, so please make sure that you follow your organization's specific instructions. You can also apply for validation, restoration, or transfer in options. In this platform, we also included the estimate tool that allows you to estimate your future entitlements. Just enter your intended date of separation, and your estimate will be generated and made available under the Documents tab. And finally, how to contact the fund. If you are an active participant of a UN specialized agency like WHO, ILO, IFAD, please reach out to your SPC secretary directly for assistance with any pension-related matters. For active participants from other UN family, please contact the fund directly with any questions you may have. You can reach us through the official channels listed on our Contact Us page. If you want to get in touch with us in writing, use the online Contact Us form instead of writing to us directly. The form helps us track and route your query to the appropriate team and handle it faster. Once you submit your query, you will receive an automated reply with a tracking number. If you prefer to speak with us, you can call us, call our contact center, which is available 24 hours, 5 days a week, with the toll-free numbers listed on our website. Additionally, you are welcome to visit us in person at our location in New York, Geneva, or Nairobi. All the relevant information about the hours and locations are available on our website. And with that, I think we can now open the Q&A segment and answer your questions.
Thank you, Dilbar, and everyone for staying on. I know we started a little late, and hopefully you can stay with us a little longer so we have time to answer a lot of the questions. I've reviewed a number of them that have come through, and already apologies to some of you if we can't manage to answer all of them during this session, but we'll do our best. So we had a question about, which was a multi-part question. It was about salary survey and increases in salary survey in the salary and how that impacts the pension. Well, so if there's a salary increase, a new salary scale, and it's a local recruit, so often the pensionable remuneration rates are updated in the salary scale for general service staff members. And so you would see the gross pensionable amount in the new salary scale. And you could imagine then that if the salary has gone up, possibly then the pensionable remuneration rate has gone up. For professional and higher, as I mentioned, there's one scale worldwide, which is in US dollars. And I had another question related to this. It was whether someone who's a professional level could max out their pension accrual by working in a high cost duty station. The post adjustment's not included in the calculation of your pension benefit. When you're a professional staff member, we look at the pensionable remuneration rate that corresponds to your level and step. So it would be the same pensionable remuneration rate regardless of your duty station if you're professional level. Second part of this initial question was about restructuring and whether a staff member who is 53 years old could bridge a period to reach age 55. So any type of consideration of this would really need to be an issue discussed between you and your employing organization. The pension fund doesn't have any say about bridging. So that's something we would say you need to arrange with your employer. If you are allowed to bridge a period and continue to pay pension contributions, then the pension fund would see you as a continuing participant. So, but please, you'll need to take that up with your employer. And the additional question was about health insurance premiums and so forth. And we had a couple of questions about that. The pension fund does not determine your eligibility for after-service health insurance. That's something you would need to speak to your employer and your health insurance provider about, or ASHI provider. So then another part of this question was about in the event of death while still in service. So if this is a death in service and you're still young, not yet even early retirement age, I mentioned that if you're married, your surviving spouse would receive a benefit, which is half of what you would have received if you had worked up until your normal retirement age. But the question went on to say, what if that spouse passes away and there are children who are older than age 21? Well, if there's any money left in your pension account, meaning that part that you paid into it from your salary plus the accrued interest that had not been paid out to you or your surviving spouse, or any other dependent, like if there had been a child under age 21 who then passed away, for example, if there's any additional amount left there, that's what's called the residual settlement, and that would be paid to someone who you designate on your Pence A2 form, which is designation of recipient of a residual settlement. And we had a similar question about, is there like a limit how much you can be paid as a pension benefit? Can it ever be more than what you yourself actually paid in? Please be aware that it's often we see that people are paid out in pension benefits throughout the course of their life more than they paid into the fund. So that is the beauty of the defined benefit plan, that you are paying into this pool of the assets and the contributions, and from that we're paying pension benefits. So yes, you can be paid more than you yourself paid into the fund. Another question, I'm just going to go in order and then try to address any that seemed repetitive. So if the participant has 2 wives, if polygamy is legal in the country where you're employed, and the 2 wives are recognized spouses, in the event of your death, they will split the surviving spouse's benefit. Another question was about staff assessment, and we don't have any we don't look at the staff assessment in the pension calculation. Then another question, in case of separation after 5 years, would I receive my contributions and the contribution of my employer? We do get this question a lot, and the answer is no. So as part of the defined benefit plan, we have the benefits that are calculated according to specific formula, and the withdrawal settlement, which is a one-time payment of your contributions and interest, is what you've paid into it, and with your interest. Now, we've had additional questions about what are these landmark periods of 5 or 10 or 15 years of service. 5 years of contributory service is important in that 5 years is required to be vested, meaning that you have the right to a monthly pension benefit for life. If you separate from service with less than 5 years of service, the only benefit option you're going to have is to take your own contributions and interest as a one-time payment. The 10-year landmark is if you choose a withdrawal settlement, once you have at least 10 years of contributory service, you actually get an additional bonus amount to your withdrawal settlement. So you're getting your own contributions and interest plus 10% for each additional year beyond the 5 years, meaning that if you have, actually you'll need 15 years so that you have the full 100% bonus to your own contributions and interest as a payout of a withdrawal settlement. So then we had about being vested. So again, you're vested after 5 years of participation of contributory service, which means you'll get a monthly benefit for life. Now, it doesn't mean that you'll start receiving the benefit when you separate from service, because you might not be old enough yet to be eligible for the payment. The youngest you can be to start receiving a benefit payment is your early retirement age. And if you retire or you separate from service when you're not even that age, then there would be a period that you're not receiving a benefit, and then you can request to start receiving your deferred retirement benefit as of your early retirement age. We will get into a lot more detail on that in the pre-retirement seminars that we give, and you can find information about this on our website under the topic benefit options. And I would encourage you to take a look at that, about the different benefit options of the periodic benefits. There was a question about benefits adjusted over time for inflation. So all pension benefits are initially calculated in US dollars, and the cost of living adjustments that are applied to the pension benefits are based on the CPI of the United States. So if there is at least a 2% increase from the previous adjustment, then there is an adjustment applied usually in April to pension benefits. I'm talking now about benefits that are already in payment. So we're talking about retirement again. And I'm going to try not to talk too much about the topic but we do have a number of these questions. So yes, benefits are adjusted for cost of living over time, and we do have information about this. Look on our website, please, at cost of living adjustments to get more information, and then also attend our pre-retirement sessions, which will be held throughout the year. And you can also refer to previous sessions if you'd like to see one of the recordings until we have our next live session. Then disability coverage, is it automatic? Well, if you're medically cleared at the time that you join, then you're automatically covered in the event that you become disabled, but the disability still has to be approved through the Staff Pension Committee. So there is an approval process that with medical reports and so forth that has to be determined that you are unable to work, and then there will be a time period that benefit is approved for. Possibly it's permanent, but it's also possible that it's only for a certain number of years, subject to another review. And if you are on disability and you die, then you're considered, this is considered death after service. So if you're married to somebody that you were married to at the time you separated from service and you remain married to them until death, that surviving spouse could be entitled to a surviving spouse's benefit. And the same with the children under age 21. Okay, there was another question about its separation, but please, Dilbar had mentioned possibly after the question was submitted, your benefit options and the amount of your benefit is determined at your separation date. So if you separate, for example, on 31 August, you can't then calculate, well, what would my benefit be at a later date? So your benefit's going to be determined at your separation date. And when you run estimates, this was another question, you put in the date of separation, which should be a future date. So you're still an active participant, but you want to see what your benefit options will be at a future date when you do separate from service. Put in a separation date in the estimate tool, and then you don't need to put in your birth date. We know your birth date. It's pulled into the calculation, and what your entitlement would be at the separation date that you put in there will take into account what your age will be at that date. So it was a question about during the 36-month break in service period. If service will continue to accrue and be factored into the eventual pension benefit. So no, if you have a break in service, you're not paying pension contributions during that period, and you're not allowed to pay pension contributions during a break in service. So it will be a period without contributions, so you're not adding to your contributory service. There was a question about someone with a secondary dependent. This is something I would say when you're separating from service, please make sure that your secondary dependent is reported to the fund. If there's some reason that you're not able to have that reported through your member organization in your final employer because of the type of contract, but you had that person as a secondary dependent during other types of contracts, the fund should have received that information. And you can now look, for many people, you can look in member self-service and see who we have listed as dependents. It doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be entitled to a benefit, but you can see if that person has ever been reported to the fund. So at least that's a start. And normally the secondary dependent is on your personnel actions that are forwarded to the fund. Okay, there was a question about the name. Someone's name is now recorded in the system differently, and it was correct initially, but then following Emoja implementation, it was changed. So I think it's very important for you to check your annual pension statement, see how your name is reflected currently. If it's not correct, you go to your HR partner and make sure that it's reflected correctly, and then that gets conveyed to the fund. So you need to make that correction with your own employing organization, not directly to the fund, as then yeah, any discrepancy, it could delay the processing of your benefit if there's an issue with your name when you separate versus how it's reflected and been conveyed to the fund. Oh, there was a question about, it's against post-separation, but in the event of your death, maybe it's a death in service, if you have a surviving spouse who's entitled to surviving spouse's benefit, and they remarry, our regulations allow them to remarry without losing the entitlement to their surviving spouse's benefit. And it doesn't get adjusted because of their remarriage. That was the question, whether they stop getting a benefit because they remarry. Can I make a contribution to increase my pension? Outside of the things we mentioned, like validation restoration, there's no option to give additional voluntary contributions. Dilbar, would you like to take over any of the questions? I can go on, but I can't. You want me to go? Okay, I've already screened a number of them, and let's see how far we can get. Okay, unfortunately, we don't have leeway to make exceptions about the 12-month deadline to opt to restore or validate. So if you were not aware of your options, say in 2019, when you began participating again, unfortunately, it's not possible now to validate a period from a decade ago. So I'm sorry, but we cannot make exceptions on those types of time frames. So there was another question about continuous service and break-in service. So how is continuous service defined? If the break-in service is more than 36 months, would the service be treated as two separate periods rather than continuous? Yes. And we do see there are people with two separate pension benefits. And depending on the start date of the second period of participation, they might have a new retirement age, because as of 2014, the retirement age is 65, whereas before that it was 62, and before 1990 it was 60. So we do see people that have two pension benefits with two different retirement age associated with them. With restoration, again, there's a 1-year deadline from the date of recommencement of participation. But there is no limit on the number of years that your break-in service can be. So if you participated from 1990 to 1993 and you took a withdrawal settlement and you returned to active participation in 2026, you can restore that withdrawal settlement, even though you had that long period in between that you were not working with any member organization. So, but you do need to request the restoration within your first 12 months of entry to the fund. So what that would do would be to restore the 3 years. In my example, I made up 3 years that you contributed in the past and were paid a withdrawal settlement for. You pay the money back with interest, and those years, months, or days that you had from your prior period of participation are added to your current and new pension account. Dilbar, please jump in if there's anything you want to add to any of my answers. Okay, so there was a question about when do we get early retirement? You need to work up until your early retirement age to be eligible for early retirement benefit. This is discussed in more detail in our pre-retirement seminars, but if you want to be eligible for an early retirement benefit, you have to work up until your early retirement age, which is either 55 or 58, depending on when you started contributing to the fund. So there was a question about someone who had different types of contracts. As long as you were a staff member and you were participating in the fund, it doesn't matter whether you had a temporary contract or a fixed-term contract. As long as you were eligible and participating, then your participation is it's continuous. There's no change from when you went from temporary to fixed term. And then there was a question about different levels of national contracts. Again, we would look at the last 5 years of your contributory service at the time of your separation. We look back 5 years. We take the 36 months of the highest pensionable remuneration rates. So it could be that the very last months might not be the highest if there's some difference in exchange rates. But we would look at the highest average 36 months in the last 5 years. There was a question about a step-by-step about how to transfer. If you're doing a transfer of accrued funds in non-UN organization, so if this is a transfer with one of our organizations that we have a transfer agreement with, Please know it is often a sort of a long process. But if you have a specific transfer request outstanding, please use our contact us form and reach us that way so we can look into your specific case and answer you personally. But generally speaking, we do have to liaise with your new employer and the old employer, and then it is not a very quick process, I'll just say. So reach out to us through our contact us form if you would like more information about your case. There's no additional voluntary contributions allowed for active participants. And can our normal retirement age with the fund be different from the one shown in Umoja? So I'm not sure what is shown in Umoja, to be honest, but if it's on your what the pension fund has as your normal retirement age would be what you see on your annual pension statement. So please check your annual pension statement, and in the section A, you'll see at the very far right NRA, which stands for normal retirement age, and check if it's age 60, 62, or 65. So in Umoja, I'm not sure what's shown there, but there is something called a mandatory age of separation, which the UN has according to its regulations, and that's age 65 when you're supposed to have to separate from service. But if your normal retirement age with the pension fund is 60 or 62, then you're already entitled to receive a normal retirement benefit from the fund, even if you continue to work longer than that. So those are two different ages. And for pension fund purposes, please consult your annual pension statement. There was a question someone wrote about having written to one of our email addresses at the fund and not getting an answer. So please use the contact us form, which Dilbar showed you on the website, to reach us, because there you will get confirmation of receipt of your query, and you'll have a reference number, and we often have an automatic reply with some general information and links to further information, but you'll get a reply from us, and you'll be able to track that we did get your query. There was a question about, again, about ASHI. We refer you to your employer and to your health insurance provider about any eligibility questions about that. Then there was a question about if you separate on leave without pay for a year, no interest will accrue if no optional contribution is submitted, but it will restore upon entry. So yes, if you take a break on leave without pay, you're still a staff member, but you're on leave without pay. And let's say you do not pay pension contributions during that period. When you go back into active, you're no longer on leave without pay, but you're back into active service and paying pension contributions again, then your contributions will resume, and the interest, this is about the interest accruing. It's on a yearly basis, the interest, the accrual of the 3.25% compound interest. And another thing, I don't know if we mentioned, so if you're on special leave without pay for more than 36 months, you're deemed to have separated from the pension fund. And then when you do come back into active pay and participation, you'll have a new participation. Someone wants to know what exactly we mean by vested pension rights. after 5 years of contributory service. Does that mean I can contribute for 5 years, then have a break in service of 10 years, and after that get a pension obtaining a lifelong retirement benefit? So yes, let's say you had 5 years of contributory service, or at least 5 years, and you separate at age, I don't know, 35. And you're still too young to start receiving the benefit, but that benefit can be a deferred retirement benefit that you could even wait until your normal retirement age to start receiving the benefit. So it just stays with the fund until you reach at least early retirement age. That's the soonest that you could start getting your payment. There was another question about single staff members who contribute to the fund at the same as everyone else, but are not covered by survivor benefits. Could the fund clarify what happens to deceased single staff members' own pension contributions in the absence of a spouse or eligible dependent? Okay, so your pension contributions and interest in the event of your death would be paid to the person or persons that you designate on your A2 form. So that is called the residual settlement that would be paid to whoever you designate, because you have no persons eligible that to receive a pension benefit from the fund as a survivor. So you can designate on your A2 form who you want to have receive that money. And what is the rationale for excluding children over the age of 21, even if they're financially dependent? Well, I'm not sure of the history, to be honest, of determining age 21, but that is just the regulations of the pension fund have determined that at that age, that is when the eligibility stops, unless the child's been deemed disabled. So the child's benefit normally then stops at the time the child reaches age 21. If you can put your child on the A2 if they're over age 21 and they're not disabled and you're otherwise single, then if you, in the event of your death, your child would be the recipient of any residual settlement that would be payable. Does the disability and death benefit still apply after separation from service? The disability benefit does not, because that is something you're covered for during your active participation. And then if you're deemed disabled and approved for disability benefit, then you are separated from service before you start receiving the disability benefit from the pension fund. The death benefit, we talked about how you're covered for death benefits for your survivors in the event of your death in service, but also if you're in receipt of or entitled to a monthly benefit from the fund. So you're you're vested, you have vested pension rights, and you have a spouse or child under 21 who is your recognized dependent, then the death benefits are also payable in the event of death after service. You can find a lot of information on survivors' benefits on our website. I really encourage you to take a look at the videos and the pages on our website about survivors' benefits. There was a question about a break in service of less than 36 months or more than 36 months. So if you have a new contract within 36 months, so your break in service is less than 36 months, and you did not receive payment from your first period of participation, then your participation is considered continuous. And the question was, how does that impact the pension in comparison to so contributing continuously or having a break and then starting a new participation? So just according to our regulations, if the break is less than 36 months, you're going to be under the same pension account with just that period that you didn't pay contributions. If your break is more than 36 months, then you have two separate accounts. Not quite sure how else I can compare it. There was a question about whether we have any idea there might be policy changes about accessing early retirement prior to reaching early retirement age. No, not that I'm aware of. And again, if you separate from service with vested pension rights, but you haven't yet reached your early retirement age, you have a few options which you can find more information about under the benefit options topic on our website. And there was a question whether all this applies to general service staff or just professional staff. The topic, what we're talking about with contributory service, break-in service, special leave without pay, all that applies to both general service and professional level staff. The main difference that we were highlighting was about the pensionable remuneration rates, that there's one scale worldwide for professional and above, and then on for general service staff, the pensionable remuneration rates are in the local currency usually on the same scale as the salary scale, but it's a different amount, the gross pensionable amount. Usually includes any pensionable allowances like language allowance in the figure. The recording of today's session and the presentation will be available if you go to the website under the resources tab. We have an item called the pension town halls, and all of our sessions are recorded and saved on our YouTube channel, which you can subscribe to. And then you can find also a link to the presentations through the resources and town hall link on our website. What happens if an employee leaves the organization before 5 years? Then you have the option only to take your contributions and interest as a one-time payment. You can also choose to leave the money there for up to 36 months to see if you do become employed again with a member organization, in which case your participation would be continuous, just resuming payments when you are again employed. So there were a couple of questions with the same sort of question about leaving with less than 5 years. Dilbar, have you seen any of the later questions? Anything you want to address? I haven't been able to go through them before.
Maybe we are over time, but maybe just one question about pension statement. Somebody mentioned that they're seeing zeros under section E. So if you do have any questions related to your pension statement, including that you see something that does not really make sense to you, please reach out to the fund so we can investigate and look at your file. Zeros should not be visible and should not be included in under Section E. So it could be due to a technical issue, but please reach out to us for any questions related to your pension statement. That's it, Denise. Over to you for any closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you. And for those of you who might have submitted questions that didn't get answered, it's either if they're about something related to retirement or something maybe not so related to today's topic. I apologize if we weren't able to address it, and please do submit a question to us through the contact form if you still have some unanswered questions. And I highly encourage you to use the tools that Dilbar covered, which are available on our website. So with that, thank you for staying with us. Sorry about the delay when starting and that we went over time. And I do hope this has been useful for you and that you do see your new pension statement in about a month's time in your member self-service account.